have an ox you need to kill? That's the thought I have for you today. And our passage, our text, comes from the book of Exodus. So to set the stage, in the book of Exodus, you've got the Jews coming out from Egypt, okay? That's why it's called the Exodus, because they are exiting from Egypt and going towards the Promised Land. But first they go in the wilderness. And at this time, Moses gives the law, or he gets the law and then gives it to the Hebrews, to the Jews there, okay? The thing I want to look at is the laws pertaining to the ox. And you say, well, why would you want to look at the laws that pertain to the ox? Well, I think that we can make a spiritual application from the passage there, okay? A lot of times in the Old Testament you look at stuff and it's not really for us because we're in the church age and we're under grace. We're not under the law, we're under grace. And so a lot of times you see things that aren't literally applicable to you. And in this case, what we're looking at, it's a civil law of the Jews. It's not actually like a divine law per se. It's more of a civil law just for the Jews there. Maybe a better way of explaining it is the Egyptians or the Hamites, the Hittites and stuff, they would not have had to follow these laws exactly. These laws were civil laws given to the Jews. Okay, and so I want to read the text to you. It's just a couple verses out of the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 21, verses 28 and 29. It says, "If an ox gore a man or a woman, that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit." Verse 29, "But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death." Okay, so the first thing that we need to realize here with this ox is that an ox is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? This was in the Bible times, like I said, and the ox were used to plow the fields. You know, they didn't have tractors and things like that back then to plow their fields. Instead, what they had were animals, and the ox was one of the main animals because it was strong, but it wasn't very smart, and so you could be the master of it fairly easily. Now, the ox is not a bad thing. You need it to live, and it's a piece of equipment, but there are certain oxen out there that could be bad and wouldn't need to be put to death if they were dangerous, okay? So the spiritual application we can make from that in the church age now is we can say, is there anything in our life that isn't bad? It's not a black and white issue. It's not absolutely bad, but maybe it's causing problems for you. And if it is, maybe that ox, so to speak, needs to die. That ox needs to die that's in your life. What are some examples, maybe, of things like this? One would be the internet. The internet is not bad in and of itself. It can be very good and very useful. It can help you with work. I know in my line of work, a lot of the communication between me and the people that I work for happens through email. It goes through the internet. Okay, and so that's a useful tool that I have and that I need for my job. But some people can spend too much time on social media. They can spend more time on social media than they do with their families. They can spend more time following the news or politics or something like that through the internet. Even worse is the sin of pornography. People looking at things that are inappropriate. Married men, they say that is one of the top sins among Christian men is looking at inappropriate stuff, looking at pornography. And so if that's one of the main sins, maybe the internet needs to be disconnected. I mean, you've got your family and your relationship with God there. If you need it for work, you have to put controls in place. You know, if you're a man struggling with pornography, tell your wife about it, and then get the software made to put the controls in place to keep you from going to those bad things, and let her set the password. Then it's up to her whether or not to unlock it for you. She's going to want to know when, and you say, well, I'm the head of the family, yeah, and you need to make the decision that's best for your family, and maybe that's telling your wife about the problem and letting her help you to get over that problem. But that freedom you have with the internet, it's a useful tool. It's like the ox, a useful tool, but it can be deadly. And if you know it can be deadly, you need to put it to death and be done with it before it goes out and causes the death of both of you, right? In verse 28 there, it says that it basically is saying that a deadly ox should die if it does something wrong. But if the owner knows it's deadly and they don't do anything about it, and then it goes out and causes problems, then the owner and the ox both need to die. And that's what will happen. Your sin will consume and take over, and then you will have something destroyed in your life as a result of this thing that you should have done away with a long time ago. And something else that we see is that your ox, your deadly ox, can actually impact others, okay? Your ox can have an impact on others, right? Because it talks about the ox goring somebody and hurting somebody else, and the owner knew that this kind of thing could happen, and so it talks about the ox affecting someone else, and then you're held accountable for that. You know, your sins don't just affect you. They can affect the church that you're in. If you're in a church and you're harboring secret sin, then that sin quenches the spirit in that body, in that congregation, and it can actually cause problems in the church on a spiritual level. It can cause problems there. And so you have to be aware of the impact that your sin could have on the church that you attend. It can impact your family and your friends. It can impact your business. If you have a problem with something and it starts to impact your work life, then that affects your ability to make money and pay the bills so that you can take care of your own family, right? So then your family's impacted, the people at your work are impacted, your boss, your co-workers, and things like that. If you're constantly on your phone at work instead of doing what you should be doing, nothing wrong with having a phone, nothing wrong with social media, but if it gets out of control, it can become a deadly tool, a deadly ox, and then it needs to die before it kills both of you. And lastly, something to think about is the fact that you will be held accountable. You will be held accountable for your ox, okay? So the work that you do, if it's good, you get a reward. But if there's things that are damaging you, you need to get rid of them. And then if you know that they're hurting your walk with God, hurting your family, and you don't get rid of them, you're going to be accountable for that ox one day, okay? If you're lost, you'll be at the great white throne judgment. And you'll be accountable for everything, mainly for rejecting Christ. Why did you do that? But if you're saved, you'll still have to give an account before God one day. And He'll want to know, what did you do with the time that was given to you? Were you a good steward of it or not? And why weren't you? If you were not a good steward of the time that was given to you, why not? Why were you wasting it? Was there something in your life? You say, well, I had something in my life, but it wasn't really sinful. It wasn't really that bad. Well, the ox is not something bad for the farmer, for the Jews back then. But if it was going to cause a problem, if it was going to harm them or someone else, they were expected to be mature enough to get rid of that ox, to put it to death so that it wouldn't hurt them or anyone else. And if they didn't, they would be held accountable later. Let me read that part to you here. It says, we were in Exodus chapter 21. Exodus 21, verse number 30, it says, if there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. Whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. Verse 32, if the ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned, okay? Sin comes into your life somehow through something that was seemingly innocent, and the sin comes in. You need to deal with that sin before God. You need to get right with God. If you're lost, you need to know where you're headed. You're headed for hell. And once you realize that, you need to get right with God. You need to deal with the sin. You need to have a repentant attitude and accept Jesus Christ. He paid the penalty for your sins once and for all on the cross. He died, He rose again, and you place your faith and trust in that gospel. And you put your faith and trust in that, and He will save you from your sin. You're accountable for that now. Maybe you are in a place of ignorance. No one's born knowing everything, but you're not ignorant anymore. I just told you the gospel. It's very plain and simple. Say, that's it. That's it. Very plain and simple. Now you're accountable for it. And if you don't come to Christ knowing the gospel, you'll be held accountable for that one day. If you're a saved person and something is going on in your life that is leading you away from God, you're going to be held accountable for that, because you know the Spirit bears witness inside of you, and you're not doing business with God about the sin, and so that is causing you to become further and further from God. It's hurting your relationship. Who knows what damage you may be doing with something that is seemingly not so bad. But God knows and you know, and so you need to put that thing to rest before it destroys you, or you will be held accountable for that.